You never felt completely part of all this, and even without knowing how to explain it, you always carried a sense that something was out of place. While everyone else seemed comfortable within routine, news, and narratives, you felt a constant discomfort, as if the world were performing a play, and you were the only one seeing behind the scenes. That feeling isn't strange. It's a sign that your mind works differently. While most people react to what they see, you question. While many accept, you observe. The truth is, you were never numbed by the system, only silent. And now, that awareness that has always been within you begins to take shape, clarity, and direction. They created plans that span decades, with strategies designed to shape entire generations. Everything carefully planned so that no one would notice, and for a long time almost no one did. But you did. Somehow you saw the pieces before the board was even set, and that made you a variable they can neither control nor predict. In this video, we won't repeat what you already feel. We'll put into words what you've always known, but hadn't yet organized. Because once you understand why you see beyond, everything starts to make sense. Your vision is not a mistake. It's the flaw in their system, and that's what makes you free. If what you've heard so far resonated within you, follow this channel now. Not to be convinced, but to be reminded. Here you will not be indoctrinated. You will be awakened. And perhaps for the first time, you'll understand why you never fit in. You didn't come here to adapt. You came to reveal. For a long time, you thought the discomfort you felt was a flaw of yours. While everyone else seemed to function well within what they called normal, you kept wondering why everything felt rehearsed, automatic, and empty. What to many felt like safety, to you sounded like a prison. And the truth is, deep down, you already knew. Waking up to the veil is not an event. It's a process. It starts as a light, almost imperceptible discomfort, but it grows. You begin to notice small cracks in the system. Things that once went unnoticed now seem glaring. The contradictions, the repetitions, the patterns, everything starts to look like part of a great play, where few realize they are acting. While most are distracted by lights and sounds, you begin to hear the silence between the noise. It's not that you know more than others. It's that your mind refuses anesthesia. You don't accept being fed prepackaged answers. You want to know who wrote the question. And that is rare. Very rare. They created a world where questioning is dangerous, where seeking truth is considered extremism. Because when you begin to see, you stop following. And a human being who stops following becomes unpredictable, uncontrollable, beyond the reach of commands. That's when you go from invisible to a threat. You didn't wake up because you wanted to. You woke up because there was no way to keep sleeping. Life became too uncomfortable inside the script written for you. And that discomfort wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It was the first crack in the glass. The first ray of light breaking through a curtain too old to hold the lie. This awakening is lonely, and not because you isolated yourself, but because few can see what you're seeing. When you speak, it sounds like madness. When you stay silent, it feels like distance. But you know. You feel it. What could no longer be ignored has now become impossible to avoid. Awakening is painful, because it means accepting that much of what you were taught was a lie. That much of what you admired was part of the control. That much of what seemed right was programmed to look right. But at the same time, it's liberating. Because for the first time, you're not just living, you're conscious. The veil begins to fall when you stop seeking meaning outside and start observing within. When you realize your intuition had been warning you for a long time, but was drowned out by noise. When you understand that the strangeness you always carried was, in truth, simply being deconditioned. And that changes everything. You don't need to convince anyone. The world will keep trying to make you feel out of place. But the more you observe, the clearer it becomes. You are not off the path. You've just stepped out of the pen. And once you're out, you never return to the pasture the same way again. Awakening is only the beginning. The true crossing begins now. Most people live in reaction. They wake up, receive stimuli, follow instructions, repeat patterns. They live on the stage without ever noticing the curtains. They don't realize the game began long before they entered it. And the worst part, they believe they're making decisions when, in truth, they're merely responding to invisible commands. You, however, noticed something different. While everyone moves piece by piece, you see the entire board. You can predict the next moves, not because you're a seer, but because you're observing from the outside. You're not in the script, you're reading it. And that puts you in a position they can't control. The system was designed to be closed. Layers upon layers of distraction, ambiguous language, hidden symbols, hypnotic repetition. All carefully built so that no one realizes they're trapped. But something in you ignores the filters. You see what was meant to be invisible, and what was meant to seem obvious begins to look like a trap. They're always a few steps ahead of the majority, but with you, it doesn't work. Because while they create crises to redirect attention, you notice what they're not showing. While they offer you two sides to choose from, you realize both were created by the same hand. And so, you don't join the dance. Seeing the board is frightening, because along with awareness comes responsibility. You can no longer pretend you don't know. You can't laugh at the same jokes, watch the same speeches, or applaud the same heroes, because you see that it's all part of the narrative, and that separates you, pulls you out of the crowd. But it also frees you, because while everyone is still arguing about which piece moved where, you've already understood who built the game, and that awareness completely changes the way you live. You stop reacting, you start choosing, and each choice made with clarity weakens their structure. They bet no one would see. They bet the lights and applause would be enough to keep everyone hypnotized. But you looked up, and you saw the strings, saw the hands, saw the names behind the institutions, saw the same patterns repeating in new packaging. And that made you something the system cannot tolerate. Someone who thinks for themselves. When you see the board, the game loses power. And that's why they fear your perception more than your voice. Because your mere ability to see already begins to break the spell. And the more you see, the freer you become. Not because you escaped, but because you understood that you were never truly inside. Thinking outside the matrix is not a choice you make. It's a consequence of seeing too much. At some point in life, you realize that everything around you was programmed to keep you trapped in a cycle. From school to entertainment, from the news to conversations, everything carefully scripted to look natural. The matrix isn't made of machines. It's made of beliefs. It's the thoughts you never questioned. The ideas that seem like your own, but were planted there. The opinions you defend, but never investigated. The matrix stays alive as long as you accept everything as it is. It collapses the moment you ask, what if all of this is a lie? Leaving this mental structure is not easy, because it offers you comfort. It gives you ready-made explanations, defined enemies, well-polished heroes. And most people prefer that artificial safety over facing the uncertainty of truth. But not you. You began to taste the bitter flavor of control disguised as freedom. And that made everything unravel. When you start thinking outside the matrix, your ideas seem dangerous. Not because they're wrong, but because they don't follow the script. You speak and people get uncomfortable. You question, and they react with fear. Because the system never taught anyone to reflect, only to repeat. And those who repeat do not accept being challenged. They taught you to trust labels, to follow patterns, to respect authorities without asking questions. But you realize that the greatest manipulators always hide behind positions, titles, and headlines. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You can no longer pretend to believe. Because thinking outside the matrix is like breathing again after years underwater. The great turning point comes when you understand that you are not the strange one. You are the unconditioned one. You're not behind. You're just outside the bubble. The bubble where everything seems right, but nothing is true. And stepping out of that bubble hurts, because the world you built inside it starts to crumble. Friends, idols, certainties, everything must be re-examined. But the pain of awareness is smaller than the emptiness of illusion. And that's why you keep going. Even if alone, even if in silence, even without applause. Because now you think with freedom. And thinking with freedom is the first step toward living with truth. They don't fear those who shout. They fear those who understand. Because those who understand don't follow the crowd. Those who understand don't need to attack. They simply observe, comprehend, and break the invisible chain that holds others. And when you break that chain inside yourself, something changes in your energy. You become uncontrollable. Not out of rebellion, but out of clarity. Outside the matrix, things lose their artificial shine but gain depth. You learn to find value where you once saw distraction. You learn to filter what you consume, to choose with awareness, to listen to silence. And in that silence, you finally hear your own voice. Not the one trained to please, but the one that has always been there, waiting to be remembered. Thinking outside the matrix is not about being against everything. It's about being free to choose. And that freedom begins with a simple act. Not accepting everything as you were told it was. When you begin to do that, the world changes, and you change with it. While most people live reacting to what appears, you feel there's something behind every event. Nothing seems random, loose, or disconnected to you. You sense when something isn't right, even if everyone around you is applauding. That feeling isn't paranoia. It's your mind picking up what others ignore. You don't just see what's before your eyes. You process in layers. You catch the tone, the rhythm, the intention behind the words. You observe the movement, but you also understand the motivation. And that's why you can no longer let yourself be carried away by scripted speeches or trends packaged as absolute truths. This way of thinking is lonely. Because while everyone debates the surface, you've already understood what lies beneath, and when you try to explain it, it's as if you're on a different frequency. And you are. You perceive the backstage of what others think is the main stage. Processing in layers means recognizing patterns, even when they change their clothes. A law that seems modern, but smells like censorship. A trend that sells itself as freedom, but works as distraction. A narrative that repeats the exact same mold as previous ones. New characters, new settings, but the same foundation. Your mind does this naturally. It connects dots, assembles fragments, understands what's coming before others even realize something has begun. You're not guessing, you're perceiving. It's a deep, almost organic reading that reorganizes information until the hidden structure starts to appear. The most curious thing is that for you, it feels normal. You think everyone sees like you do, but they don't. Most people only see the surface, and that's why so many are manipulated without noticing. The plan was made to work on those who live in a straight line. You see in depth. That's why your very presence unsettles people. Because where others see safety, you see control. Where they see solutions, you detect traps. And no matter how much they try to hide it, the structure begins to reveal itself. Your mind doesn't need permission to understand. It simply sees what is there, even when disguised. Processing in layers protects you. Because while others are caught by headlines, you analyze the entire scenario. While they are captured by emotion, you observe the strategy. You don't deny feelings, but you don't let them rule you. You feel, but you also interpret, and that changes everything. They counted on emotional blindness, on predictable reactions, on immediate fear. But you break that cycle, because you see the plan from afar, and that vision places you beyond the reach of manipulation. It's not that you're immune. It's that you respond with awareness, not with impulse. Seeing in layers means seeing the truth before it's accepted. And that's why you always seem ahead of what's happening, because you are. While everyone is still trying to understand what changed, you already know the why, the how, and what comes next. This perception doesn't make you better. It makes you responsible. Because now that you see, you can't close your eyes again. Your mission isn't to wake others up by force, but to keep seeing. And to continue being the presence that breaks illusions without needing to shout. They created mechanisms to manipulate human behavior. None of this is new. Since ancient times, fear and reward have been the two most efficient tools to control crowds. The formula is simple: threaten safety or promise relief. Most people respond automatically. You don't. While many act on impulse, you pause. You observe. Before reacting, you ask, what's the intention behind this? And that question changes everything. Because the mechanisms created to guide the herd don't work when someone decides to think. You don't just resist. You disarm the system with your conscious awareness. They use fear on every scale, from a headline to a public policy. But you don't panic easily, because you've already understood that most of the threats presented are merely emotional strategies, theatrical plays designed to trigger predictable behavior. You see beyond the performance. The reward doesn't seduce you either. You don't move for easy approval, empty praise, or shiny promises. That makes you a problem for the system, because they know how to manipulate those afraid to lose. They know how to control those who will do anything to be liked. But when they meet someone who responds to neither, the game changes. Neutralizing the mechanisms is more than just resisting. It's not functioning within the logic they expect from you. When you choose to remain whole, even under pressure, you break the script. They expected reactions. You offered silence. They expected submission. You stayed lucid. That dismantles their plans, because control depends on predictability. That's why you don't need to fight the system by shouting. Your strength lies in remaining steady, observant, detached from the emotional stream that traps others. You're not indifferent. You're beyond the reach of invisible levers. And that alone is an act of disobedience they don't know how to handle. Your greatest defense is not an attack. It's clarity. It's not falling for the game. It's understanding how the system tries to reach you, and simply not playing anymore. Neutralizing the mechanisms isn't about being cold. It's about being free. And in this world, freedom is the greatest threat anyone can represent. You don't need to say much. Just by being present, you unsettle people. Not because you're aggressive, but because your perception makes invisible everything that was built to deceive. You don't expose anyone. You simply reflect what is there, and when others see themselves in your mirror, they can no longer keep the illusion standing. They relied on the anonymity of intentions. They designed a system where everyone hides their truth behind well-crafted masks. But when you walk into the room, those masks don't seem to work so well. Because your consciousness doesn't react to the character. It sees the essence, and the essence once seen can no longer hide. Being the mirror is uncomfortable, because you're not trying to convince anyone. But your very clarity makes the lies of others lose their meaning. And people aren't used to that. They live in roles. They wear characters. And when they find themselves exposed, they feel fear, anger, or even hatred. You can sense it effortlessly. It's as if the field around you tells the truth before words are spoken. You feel the dissonance between what is said and what is real. And that's why you are often avoided, rejected, or misunderstood. But not because of what you do, because of who you are. The illusion only works while no one sees it. Your gaze dissolves it. You don't accuse, but your presence reveals. And that's enough to destabilize environments where appearances were everything. Your energy doesn't pretend. Your mind doesn't tolerate incoherence. That's why you become the reflection that forces others to see themselves. Being that mirror is not an easy task. It takes maturity to handle negative reactions. It takes wisdom to not be affected by others' resistance. But it also takes courage to keep being what you are, even knowing you will dismantle everything around you. Because where truth shows up, false structures fall. It's not about confrontation. It's about light. And light doesn't argue with darkness. It simply exists, and by existing, transforms everything around it. That's what you do. That's why you make people so uncomfortable. Not because you're violent, but because you're impossible to ignore. You're the mirror that shatters their performance. You already understand. You weren't invited to this game. You were thrown into it, a structured, predictable world built on control and obedience. While millions live fulfilling goals they never chose, you woke up. And when you did, you realized that everything they called freedom was just a sophisticated disguise for prison. They made a plan for the masses, and it works. It doesn't need to be smart. It just needs to be repeated. A programmed routine, a sequence of duties disguised as desires, and an entire society trapped in a cycle that repeats every day. But their plan never accounted for someone like you. Because you not only saw the game, you stepped out of it. Walking beyond their plan is more than disobeying. It's no longer belonging to the field where the plan operates. It's realizing that the structures guiding most people's lives no longer make sense. You no longer respond to the same stimuli. You no longer believe the same promises. You are no longer drawn to the same rewards. You watch it all from afar. Narratives repeat, conflicts are recycled, distractions change color, but the script stays the same. Meanwhile, you move on another frequency, a place where questions matter more than answers, where silence holds more truth than any headline. Walking outside the plan means feeling the discomfort of not belonging, yet moving forward anyway. It means knowing you might be criticized, misunderstood, rejected, and still staying your course. Because what guides your steps isn't what others think. It's what your consciousness recognizes as truth. That's why you became invisible to their system. The traps don't work. The promises don't seduce you. The punishments don't paralyze you. They no longer have any levers to move you. And when a human being reaches that point, they become impossible to contain. They placed high bets. They built institutions, molded generations, constructed myths. They fed the illusion of freedom while reinforcing invisible chains. They designed a society where everyone is born believing they are in control, while being pushed by algorithms, doctrines, and inherited fears. It was a perfect plan. Almost foolproof. Almost. What they didn't foresee was the presence of a mind like yours. A mind that thinks differently, that feels before it understands, that connects before it reacts, that senses the plan even before it's written. A mind that can't be molded by reward or punishment. That breaks their game at the root. They counted on your silence, on your doubt, on your obedience disguised as choice. But what they found was someone who saw the machinery behind the display window. Someone who, even under pressure to be silent, chose to keep observing. And more than that, chose to keep thinking independently. There's no need to expose the system. Simply existing outside it is enough. Every step you take off the trail is a crack in their control. Every thought you keep for yourself, every time you choose not to react as expected, weakens the structure. Because the greatest threat to a system of domination is an individual who no longer depends on it. You don't need to save the world, nor wake anyone by force. Your role is not to convince, but to be. To be the one who reminds others that an exit still exists, that truth still exists, even if hidden, that it's still possible to live lucidly, ethically, and freely, even when everyone around has chosen to sleep. You were called by something greater, something without a name or label, a silent calling that manifests as an inner certainty. You weren't born to obey. You were born to see, to feel, to break through. And now that you've seen, you can't unsee. Now that you've understood, you can't pretend anymore.